Okay, so now we want to look at squares and square roots, situations where there's squares and where there's square roots, and we want to make x the subject. So in this case, just remember, we're making x the subject, right? You will always be told which letter to make subject of the formula. So here we have x squared is equal to b plus c over d. Now, some of you might think x is the subject here, but what is actually the subject is x squared. We don't want x squared, we want x. So we have to remove this squared. If I take this square the other side, it becomes square root. But you must square root every single thing on that side. So x will be equal to, I'll put a giant square root, which is going to go over the whole thing on that side. So x is equal to square root of every single thing on that side, right? Everything goes under one giant square root. So x is equal to square root of that. When x is now x, not x squared, now we've made x the subject of the formula. Now, what would I do if I had square root of x is equal to, for example, p minus d? I have to remove the square root, right? The opposite of square rooting is squaring. So when this comes this side, it squares everything. So x will be equal to p minus d. Put brackets and square everything. Note that this is different from saying p squared minus d squared. Do not say p squared minus d squared, right? Say p minus d, put brackets, all squared. The p squared minus d squared is a totally different thing. So try and avoid that. If I have 2 times square root of x equals b, now I have to remove the outermost item, right? I have to get rid of 2 before I move the square root. It's very important. I have to first of all deal with anything that may be outside the square root. So if I have square root of x, I have to look outside the square root of x first and deal with everything that's outside that square root. So we have a 2 that's multiplying. To remove that 2, we have to divide both sides. So I cancel off that 2. I get square root of x is equal to b over 2. Then I can now move my square root that side, and I can get x is equal to b over 2 all squared, right? B over 2 all squared, right? So that's it. So again, our rule is if anything is outside the square root, right, you deal with it first. So here we have an a, right? Before we can touch the square root sign, we want to deal with this a. So I multiply both sides by a since it's in the denominator. Then I'll get square root of x is equal to ac, right? Once I'm here, I can remove the square root and say x is equal to ac all squared. AC all squared. If I have square root of x over a now, remember these are different. Square root of x over a is different from square root of x over a. So here the a is under the square root. I cannot touch the a until I remove the square root. The square root is like a lid. It's like a lid that's covering the a. You cannot touch the a unless you remove the lid. You open the lid here. So I move this first to the other side. I get x over a is equal to b squared. Then I can multiply by a. So I multiply both sides by a. Then I'll get x is equal to ab squared. In this case, you see that the squared only affects b. It does not affect a there. The square root only affects b. It does not affect a. So those are some considerations, some basic considerations when dealing with squares and square roots.